Right. Yes. While we wait for other folks, as someone pointed out a moment ago, I do have some new classes coming up at Metalworks. So the workshop schedule that remains, I'm putting in the chat for you all. I'm doing both a pair of virtual classes and an in-person / virtual. You can take it either way. So I'm doing an in-person, well, I've still got spots in my in-person Portland area class making class, which is August 9th and 10th. And then I have the virtual 3-day class. That one I may shift if I don't get interest for the weekend I've got it scheduled on. Seems to be a tough one. September 6th, 13th, and 20th. It's running on 3 consecutive Saturdays. I'm teaching a decorative stone setting class for Metalworks virtually, and I'll show you some of the samples of that in a minute so you can see what kinds of things we work on. And then I'm the in-person / virtual combo session I'm doing is November 17th, which is, I believe, a Monday, I think. Right before I go to do the Paradise City Arts Festival in Marlborough, Massachusetts. While I'm already in the area, I'm going to do an in-person that you can also take virtually workshop called Do I Keep My Day Job, which is about how to think about your hobby as you convert it over to be more businesslike. And that's just a fire hose of information and lots of Q&A and that sort of thing. I do have a longer version of that I do with people where they can do some exercises to help sort of connect the dots in the things that I talk about. But this one is just the introductory lecture. And then in January, I'll be teaching a virtual class again for Metalworks on round and pair prong settings. Those of you that have done the Cogswell projects have seen those happening, but Metalworks is looking for some prong setting classes in particular, so I told them I would do that for them. And I'll show you some examples of those as well. Meanwhile, I don't know what other classes I'm going to schedule and nothing else this year, but if you have ideas that you'd really like covered in 2026 that you want me to put on my schedule or places that you'd like to see me teach, feel free to send it my way. Doesn't have to be now. You can drop me an email or whatever. I'm also going to remind you of the Rio Grande code that when it expires for you, you can always grab it again and put it in. And that code is going in chat as well. And that will get you Rio Pro pricing for 6 months at a time. And what else do I want to talk about before we get into the heart of it? I think those are the biggies. Does anybody have any show and tell for me today? Anybody have anything they're working on? Anything you're stuck on? We've only got a few more sessions to get other people's ideas in. Nothing? Nothing?
I wish.
That's my favorite part of this series, guys, when I get to see what you guys are working on. Okay, so what have I been working on? Let me switch over to Spotlight, and then I will show you. My Zoom is looking a little different than usual. I think they must have just done an upgrade. Okay, and what is the right camera for this?
Yeah, I had to upgrade my Zoom to get in. So they're
Oh,
definitely,
yeah?
yeah, it says it's AI something, Zoom workplace. Yippee.
Oh, yeah. So that's actually the AI companion. It may just have been notifying you that I turned it on, I think, because what it does is it takes basically word for word notes, pretty close to word for word. It's very good. And so I get a document back that theoretically I should be able to convert into captions and so on when I move to YouTube with it. I have yet to do that because it takes a lot more time than I usually want to spend on getting the YouTube video out for you guys, but I'm keeping it. It also helps me take some of the things that I tend to say a lot in classes. And when I'm working on the book, I'll be able to pull out some of the hopefully gems, no pun intended, that I tend to repeat. That's my theory anyway, and I'm sticking to it. Okay, so what did I want to show you? I want to show you, first let me zoom in and show you some of the things for the stone setting class. Some of you have seen a few of these designs before, but these are things that we did. This is actually stuff we did not cover other than talking about it in the Cogswell project. And on this first one, let me get in, wrong direction. There we go. So two different styles of things that are taught in the workshop that'll be the virtual one at Metalworks. One is this, what I'm calling the trompe-l'oeil. I can never pronounce the second word of that. I should probably give it a different name since I can't say it. Trompe-l'oeil format, which is this sort of 3D effect that you can get. And you can see dimensionally, it creates some interesting effects out of a basic bezel. So this is a step bezel that's been modified, and you can put different styles all along it, and it gives some nice dimensionality and depth to it. So that's one style that we'll be covering in that workshop. Oop, and there's one, I have one that's my favorite of these, which is, I always like teardrop stones. I haven't set this one for anything yet, but you can get some really lovely effects. It doesn't have to be on a round or an oval. And just with simple tools to get you those effects. And then the other is, I like to call these cupcakes because they look like they've been frosted with decorative things. And so it's taking, again, a standard step bezel, put these into frame, and just fancifying it with gallery wire, which is both easier and harder than it seems if you haven't played around with gallery wire much. If you have played around with gallery wire, you know the frustrating points of how easily it melts. But it's about order of operations, as so much of what we do is, to get you there. So that's a 2-day workshop, again, virtually through Metalworks. And then in January, I will be covering the basket settings, basic round, and then we're going to do a pair as well, which is that nice combination of prong and sort of built up sheet prongs. So those are the kinds of things we'll be covering in those. Any questions on any of those, or any close-ups you want?
Yeah, I'm just curious on the ones where you use the gallery wire. Are you
Yep.
soldering it flush to the bezel, or is it butted up on the side?
It's outside of the body of the piece.
Okay, yeah, so it's butted up against there.
Yeah, so it becomes the equivalent of the outer wall
They're
of the
really
step
pretty.
bezel.
Yeah, really pretty.
Thanks. The thing about this that makes them fun is make sure that you go shopping at multiple places. Sorry, my nose is going crazy from allergies today, so I'm really itchy. Hang on a sec. Make sure you shop at a few different places for your gallery wire, because every company that sells it seems to have different options. And when you start playing with mixed metals on them, it's really fabulous. There's some lovely brass and copper ones. And, for me to say that something in brass is lovely says a lot, because I just hate working with brass. But I go to Cool Tools, I go to Rio, I go to FDJ Tools. I just shop around for a variety of different wires. And some of them are easier than others to work with. Let me zoom back out a little bit for our other demonstration pieces.
What is it?
Any other questions on those before I put them away? Okay, that class is those two classes are coming up at Metalworks virtually, so you can attend them from the comfort of your own studio. The class in Portland in August is clasps from simple to structural. It's a 2-day workshop, and we cover probably half a dozen wire-based clasps and box clasps, both basic and integrated in larger hollow forms. And then for the virtual version of it, I tend to add one fancier clasp, which leads to my next demonstration piece, which is showing you that I am actually working on the clasps for the book that I'm working on. And so this was a prototype. I was trying out a clasp that I have not made before, and trying to get my directions written up, and have learned a lot. This is a prototype, so it both works for the prototype factor and does not work because it is not a sturdy clasp, but it's a magnetic one, and I wanted to see what the bounds of the magnetic clasp were. I definitely need to find stronger magnets, and I went too shallow, or too I didn't go the right proportions. What really needs to happen on this, and I will do this on my next one, is that one of the magnets needs to lift above the edge of its container by about half of its thickness, and the other needs to sink down, because otherwise we get this effect, right? It's too easy for any downward action to pull it apart. But conceptually, it's a pretty straightforward clasp. It consists of nested tubing, 2 magnets, and a rivet. And that's it, right? So it's very straightforward. It's one of the few things that I will glue in this world, in this metalsmithing world. That and pearls, basically. And it is one that you could make safety catches on. So a good addition to this style of clasp would be to have little hinged clasps, hinged safety hooks on either side, so it gets latched into place. I'll also hopefully be working on a version of it that is bayonet style, where they have a little bit more of a link together. I'm sort of trying to push the bounds of what I can do with magnets, which are not a favorite of mine, because as soon as you put them in, you can no longer, pickle and things like that. But they are definitely something that people really like working with. So again, this is just quite literally small tube inside that's just the size of the cable I'm putting in, with a tightly fitted outer tube, and then a little rivet cutting all the way through, and the magnets themselves. Questions? Okay. It's not a terribly fancy sort of clasp in general. Magnetic clasps are sort of fairly pedantic in my mind, but it's great for people that have a hard time putting clasps on and off, and so I want to include it in the work. Next up is our piece that has now become 3. So those of you that were with me last week, you may recall that I had decided that the hinge points, because of the scale of the hollow forms, were too much as a full loop. They were not resting in a way that was pleasing to me. They were getting sort of clunky and bendy in the wrong spots and didn't have enough fluidity. So I've taken it apart into what's going to become 3 segments, because there's no way I want to miss out on something that focuses on this great clasp, right? That's where we started. Just for those of you that weren't with us at the beginning of the journey, when I pulled this out of the box, this had some wire-based chain links with it, and I wasn't terribly thrilled with the design. So we went from, can we modify the wires, to can we balance it out a little bit with something nice and weighty? And that went to, can we turn it into a really unusual clasp, which is this 3-slot resting clasp, right? So that's going to be the piece. Originally, I was thinking it was going to sit this way, and the links or whatever was going to go around. By the time it got this much heft to it, the wire chain was just too weak looking, too lightweight proportionally for the work. So we went on to make these hollow forms, and it was going to be a progression of small to large around the space, right? And it was going to be all hollow forms, and that led to, how are we going to connect them? And so we tried using saddle hinges, and that didn't have enough movement and was a little too weak feeling for the weight of the pieces. Collectively, they add up to a lot of weight and therefore a lot of torque on the material. So we moved back to more traditional hinges, but as with any of these things, you need to consider the directionality of the hinges. They need to have both forward and back movement, right? They need to be able to bend this way. and they need to have flex that way for the different sizes of people's bodies and how it lays on them. So I came up with this alternating pattern, but by the time we got that all set and I was putting together the last of the hinge pins, it was really clear to me that it was just going to be an awkward layout. So last session, after much talking with those of you that were here, I've taken it apart and we did some playing around design-wise to see what would go well. And so one of the things that I had in my kit is these strand pearls. And I'm not a big fan of single bead strand necklaces, but I really like trios. I like odd numbers of things. Even numbers just never works for me. If I do it, it looks wrong. I don't know why, but it's got to be an odd number. So somewhere along the lines, it'll be something similar to that. I don't need to worry about a clasp in the back because our clasp is built into the front. But what I do need to worry about is that I have to remember how to knot pearls because these are not properly knotted. They're just strand strung. And so that's going to be a long process for me because I was really, really slow at it the last time I knotted pearls. And I need to come up with some kind of way to connect the 3 strands in to the device, which could be as simple as a little wire, a little half ring along each edge. I'm going to take the stone out because I'm terrified that after all this work, I'm going to break this stone one of these days. So it could just be something simple like wiring them in, but I don't feel that that's a very finished look, just straight in. So I'll probably want to build some kind of frame for it. One of the things I've considered is, do I want sort of a box-like, sort of something like that just hides where the pearls connect? And if so, would it be attached directly? See if I can get this to where you guys can see what I'm talking about. Would it be attached right to the surface? So it's just a hiding it, or would it be soft, soft connected, so it's got jump rings or something and has a little flexibility? My inclination is to probably build it so that it's got some movement to it. I like movement, but I got to think about whether that's too much movement for this particular style of clasp, right?
How
So
do you
that's
like
one out of,
it?
sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, Rachel, first of all, I love to knot pearls and I'm pretty good at it. And
Yeah.
so the first thing I'd ask is, what do you generally use at the end of your strand to attach it? Like if you were just doing a classic type of clasp, do you use bead tips?
I don't use bead tips with pearls. There's the spirally silver
Right. Yeah, French wire.
French wire. Yeah, I use that and then put a connector onto that.
Okay.
Um,
Because that's
but I
when I
freely
do multi,
confess.
sorry,
Yeah,
go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, go ahead.
When I do multi-strands like that, you can
Yeah.
either use French coil or bead tips, but then I attach them to a jump ring. And if you
Yeah.
attach that to another jump ring that's attached to your clasp in that case, right? Like you say,
Yes.
you could build something where if you wanted something that size, where it would be like an anchor inside, right?
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was envisioning, is that the jump
Right,
rings on the end, it's the finish that I don't like, of the showing of all of where they connect. So the
right,
jump rings would be hidden
right,
inside of this
right.
to connect it out. And I don't know whether I'd do gold or whether I'd do reticulation silver. I was making some to play around with. I might
Mm-hmm.
do reticulation silver on one side and gold on the other. Not sure.
Right, right. Well,
But
and the
yeah,
advantage of doing it that way too is that you can space the strands as you wish, so to speak, right? Because if they
right.
all three
Yes, you can
were joined,
control it.
yeah, on one jump ring, they'd all come to one point, as opposed with the width of that clasp, it would be nice just the way they're laying now,
Yep.
right?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
actually really like oops, that's real gold. I don't want to be using that right now. I really like this sort of splash of gold because we were going to get some of our gold in the other elements of it. But since we are disconnecting things, we're not going to have that. So this, by the way, those of you that haven't seen me use this, this is just heavy gauge silver gold foil. It's a florist's foil. And it is super handy for modeling things, which I need to remember to do more often, as you'll learn when I talk about the other pieces of this necklace. So something like that is a pretty striking piece. Let's put the stone back just so we can get the full effect. Right? That's pretty classic. Modern, but classic. And so it's got the cool, unusual clasp. I'm pretty happy with that as a piece. I'm especially liking the gold. I think I'm going to move away from adding more reticulation to this.
Yeah,
But yeah, it's a matter of now making, I'll probably make these out of bimetal, because why would I spend the money for lots and lots of gold when I can spend it for just a stupid amount of gold?
well, and the gold
But
tone
other,
goes nice
go ahead.
with the rose. I like the gold tone with the
Yeah.
rose, and then if the other side is silver, you know. So that's a nice.
So wait, you're saying the gold over here and the reticulation here?
No, I like it that
Oh.
way too. I'm just saying by using the bimetal, not only will you save money, but you'll have that contrast that, you know, the silver will be visible if you were to look inside.
If you were to look down the, yeah.
And I like the
so
gold.
then it's a matter of the connection between this unit and this.
Right.
And again, I think I'm going to see about doing enough that I can have a little bit of movement between them. So it would probably be backing the bottom. This will become a little box, and through which I'll put my attachment hooks, the hook and eye portion that I need to connect the jump rings of the pearls to.
Right.
And then I would work on probably a 3 or 4 jump ring connection, probably 3 because I've got 3 and it'll look better. So half jump rings, and then a single jump ring between them, between each.
Right. Yeah, and
For
making
those of you
sure that
I'm
you'll
talking
have.
a lot, so let me draw that one just so it's clear to everyone.
Right. And what I would say is figuring out the proportion so that it's easy to get the jump ring you need to get in and maneuver close.
There's our stone. There's our hollow form with all the reticulation, and then our gold work would sit like a little box. Pearls coming out of it. And then underneath here, we would have jump rings and jump rings, a little higher up than that probably, and connecting jump rings. So there would be movement between the pieces.
When you've strung pearls before, what tools do you use?
I use as few tools as possible because I hate stringing pearls, but I'm usually using really, really fine tweezers, silk cord. I'm not a fan of putting real pearls on any of the steels or anything like that. And a pair of really, really sharp scissors, and then a threading needle. This one's all tangled up, but this kind of thin needle.
The twist needle?
Like a twist? This isn't actually one of the twists. This is the straight up, like just super fine.
Right. Okay.
And I'll pull, I'll have what's the thing for burrowing into the pearl if you need to, pearl reamer, in case any of my pearls aren't well drilled.
Yeah.
But yeah, I learned from the folks at, oh gosh, Statura. I learned from that team how to do the knotting, and it's been a few years, so I'm going to have to go look at my notes and remind myself, because my frustration is I rarely get my knot tight enough, snug enough up against the next pearl in line. And so I'm always frustrated. And the one that gets messed up is usually like 3/4 of the way through stringing.
Of
drives me
course.
bonkers.
Well, I find
So,
if
but yeah.
I like the fine needle tweezer
Mhm.
too. And then what I do
Yep.
is I try and point the tips down to the pearl, grab it, then let go enough that I can actually pull that thread more. So I really am
Mm,
seated on top of that pearl, right?
got it.
I form my knot and I go in and get as close as I can. And then, without moving anything, take that tweezer out, get on top of the knot, pull it to the pearl, and then separate the threads and pull it down.
Ooh, the separating the threads is a nice tip. I had not been doing that. That's a good call.
Yeah,
So that's
that's
one that's not going to happen until I have done that stringing. And I probably won't make these boxes until I have all my strands strung because I've got to dig up. I've got some freestanding pearls. This is barely thick, long enough. So I either have to find some matching ones or I need to dig up if I have more buried at the bottom of the box. But
either
that's
that.
one.
Can I just throw this one out too? A pink pearl in
Yep.
there would be pretty good.
You know, I am not I'm not a big pink pearl gal, but the ones that are really rough, I do love. We did try pink pearls with this the other day, and it really washed out its already awkward color. So I'm pretty comfortable with the slightly cream colored off whites.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and I actually really, I'm not usually an all over kind of pearl, whatever these offset drills are, but I actually really like the roughness. What's it called?
Tip drilled.
Hip, like
Tip,
my hip
yep.
bone. Oh,
No,
okay.
the
Hip
tip,
drilled.
the
New one
top
on me.
tip.
Oh, tip drilled. TIP. Gotcha. Okay. So next up was the other pieces of the necklace because spent a lot of time on these hollow forms. I was not going to let them go. So I'm going to come back to this one because this is the one we're going to work on today, other than to say that I split them up and sorted them in a different order. So I took some of the larger ones as centerpieces and basically split them up so that I'll have two pendants. These need a little filing before they're going to actually fit because I did them out of order. But we're going to get two necklaces. And this is not going to be awkward because it's got just enough movement for the because it's going to be around the front of the neck of the chest, and so it's not going to get in the way. I'm not going to do all of these strands. I just don't want to unknot them right now because they'll go everywhere. These are glass beads that are sand finished, so I really like their vibe with the textures in here. And then this stone really picks up a lot, but I have to decide whether it's a viable thing to hang a stone below a hinge. I'm not sure I don't know. I may come up with something that hangs and loosely and has multiple links that comes out to the side so that it doesn't interfere with the fluidity of the bend. I keep putting my own hands in my way for it. But so I'm coming up with something that says hang me down below. But this is the last one I'm going to work on. I want to think about that one. It's just that the colors are such perfect matches to these stones. I may change my mind, and because I have extras of these, this may become part of something else for the other strands. But broadly, that's going to be that, and it's going to, these I'm still planning on putting some kyumbu down in the recessed pieces, so there'll be more pops of gold than just the pin connectors. That's all there is on that one right now. And the one that I've been focusing on is this one, which uses the larger sets of the components. And these gorgeous, I think they are, yeah, they're rutilated or termalinated. Rutilated is the gold and termalinated is the black quartz, I think. So I think these are rutile beads, which they're just spectacular. And I actually really, even though this is still just the strand they came on, I think it is silk, and I really love the yellow running through it. And now I need to come up with some connectors, and that's what I've been playing around with. I'm also going to add sunstones to it, which picks up nicely the colors of some of the rutile. And they'll be set in gold. So I've got that trillion, and then I've got 3 different sizes of round that I'm going to use. And I still need to make this bezel, and that's one of the things I'll be looking at today. And I need to come up with a connector that gets these twisted together the way that I want, which is I really want them spun together, right? I don't want them just free hanging. So I want something along those lines. And so I made the mistake of trying to prototype with real materials, and I shouldn't have done that. I know better. But it's going to be something like this. It's just a little clunky and awkward looking still. I get that to just sort of rest there. But it picks up the textures. I went back and forth on whether I wanted to do them in gold or in the reticulation, and I think I've decided pretty firmly that I prefer the reticulation. And then, of course, I don't have a clasp yet. So they were back to where we started, and I got to make a clasp that'll go somewhere here. Or I find a way to make the connector be part of the clasping mechanism, but I think probably it's going to need to be here. And I suspect I'm going to want to do a box clasp in the same shapes at the back. Questions?
Very nice. I like that.
Thoughts? Opinions? I'm open to opinions on these.
I think you're going to have a stunning collection with these 3. I think it's great.
Yeah.
Yeah, when they get
It was
finished
pretty good.
73 years from now at the rate I'm going. Yeah, so, and I'm not a big bead person. So here's the thing. I love looking at strands of beads. I feel like a dragon looking at a hoard of beautiful things whenever I'm looking at strands of beads. And there's so many materials that I absolutely adore. I just don't work with them very often. So whenever I start something like this, that's my overwhelm, is how do I do the thing with the beads and not have them scattered all over the floor 10 minutes later, right?
Well,
So
if,
this, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, if you have the clasp up there, you don't have to worry about twisting the beads because you can twist the clasp and the beads will
No,
twist.
you still need them twisted before you connect, or else they'll untwist, right? So they actually have to be sort of braided together almost, because otherwise they open back up on their own and they end up reverting too straight.
Well,
You need to
only
actually,
if the connection is mobile. If it's fixed, if
you
it's
mean
a fixed,
if I build it so that it connects in here, I can twist.
Exactly.
yeah.
Yes.
You can, yeah.
Yeah, the challenge is that I think it would put, these are hefty enough pieces. I think it would put torque trying to pull the necklace away again as it tried to
Okay.
unwind, unless
Uh-huh.
so that's one of the reasons that my brain went immediately to this thing that helps twist them. You know, let's talk
Yeah.
about this, because even though it's a bad mock-up, the goal is, the other thing is it's also it's disproportional if these are untwisted. Like if I were to go with one of these, I would have it way splayed out. It would look funny, or it'd have to come in from the side. I definitely want to come in from the point. So
Right.
this overweights the proportion of the design, right?
Yes.
And I
You know,
can't make it any closer. So I went, well, I got to have them bundled. So could I do them all into one? You bet. And we're going to prototype this a little bit today with the foil. But I started thinking, well, what's going to make it feel like it flows out of the material that we've already got? And I said, well, if I use the reticulation material, I can build this sort of organic tube thing that hides the bottom bead for each of them and keeps them already spinning in the direction that I want when I'm trying to twist them. So I
Rachel?
I like this idea. It also takes the proportion down a bit,
Yeah.
but I think what I really, really want is for them to taper so
That's
that
what I
they
was gonna,
truly flow.
yeah. I was gonna say cone.
That's what I was
Right?
thinking
Curve, did you
too,
say?
like a cone.
Yeah, make it, because that's where
Yeah,
the weight on the what's essentially a tube, it may have a slight taper, but not a whole lot. If you taper that more than like a cone, then yes, then you'll first of all have less material as the three come together. And
Yep.
it will flow. Visually, it also would flow. And it's also very
Yeah.
typical with a lot of beadwork, especially the Southwest, is they use
Right.
cones. So
Yeah, I don't want to go to the like pointy cones. I think I still want to tap partway down, but we're going to see because we're going to approach it. That's the delight of this material. Whoops, what did I just fling? I hope that wasn't important. The delight of this material is that we can cheaply and quickly model something that will emulate the shapes that we're talking about. So we're going to actually do that now, unless anybody has other questions or ideas about this piece.
What is
Just-
the hap you're saying? What is that?
This is a foil. The brand, I'll get you guys the brand name. I've got another roll of it. It is called Maid-o-Metal 38 gauge decorator foil. Soft aluminum, one side colored gold tone. And I can't remember whether I got it on Amazon or someplace else, but Maid-o-Metal. I was introduced to this by Jane Redmond. She uses it. You can even use it when you're testing die pressings, right? Both the cutaways and the actual, like if you're doing any carved forms and so on. You do a little carving, you test your press, you do a little more carving, you test your press again. You can see it as it progresses. Fantastic stuff. So as you guys may remember, some of the projects that I've done in the course of this, I've pre-modeled my set of them. So that piece that I was working on with all of the palm wood and the hollow forms that I just finished recently. I have the earrings down here, but I don't think the necklace is down here. So this one that I was doing as necklace. I modeled this while I was sitting on the coast of Maine because I couldn't bring my whole gear with me across from this side of the country. So I bring a roll of the foil. I'm dropping everything today. And I just mock things up, but I can also put, like, I even drew in the textures that I wanted to repeat from the palm wood. So it's great stuff for playing around on the cheap and getting the effect you want before you model it. Plus, it means that you can have a template that you can unfold and use as your model for cutting out the real deal.
Rachel, when you say you draw it in, like like how do you do that? Like with a pencil or like
Literally a ballpoint pen will do it, or you bring okay. Not allowed to hold things today, guys. Maybe not on the torch today. Just a burnisher or something. It depends on how thick or thin a line you want. But it's basically like it takes anything that you do to it and presses in, right? So you can practice patterning for engraving or patterning for chasing and repoussé, anything that you'd like. And you can get like copper foil that's even heavier, but this is nice because it's bendable and foldable and it behaves like metal because, well, it's metal. So yeah, fantastic for modeling things. Okay. Oh, I forgot one other thing that's in this necklace that I've been working on that we can demo in a bit, if I can figure out where I put them. The uprights, I had talked to you all in an earlier session that I wanted my upright pins to be stone set.
Oh, you jeweled them.
So pardon?
You
Yes, I
added
bejeweled
your-
them.
Jeweled them. Yeah, cool.
And so these I made the little tubes that go at the top. I took tubing and made a little capper at the top. I had tried a few different ways. I tried just using tubing, open tubing, and making it be just thick, just the right thickness to go on the wire, and they kept slumping on me. So I ended up making little bezel cups and then soldering the wire center on them. And then I'm doing these are sapphires, so I'm doing them preset before I attach them so that I don't have a pain in the butt soldering exercise, and then a subsequent pain in the butt setting exercise. So I preset them, and not in this one, but in this one. Can't do it in the regular size one. So in this, Here's one of those tubes that I created. So I put a little base on it, soldered the wire onto the base. You got to be really careful to center them. As you'll see, these are not terribly well centered, but it makes it more difficult if you don't have them nicely centered. And keep them a little farther away. There we go. And if you have a reversible Fordham, you put it in reverse. Oops, I was already in reverse. And then I'm just using the right size drill bit right size setting bit for my stone. And gotta remember my wax. And where'd my foot pedal go? Come here. So I'm just holding the burr in a hand vise and drilling by the act of running in reverse. So I'm drilling down to the height that I need for setting. And I don't have the stone pulled for this one, so I'm not going to go any further than that. But once I get it set just below the edge in the level that I need, then I'm going to put my stone in and grab a burnisher, good old standard burnisher. I switch to forward, and my stone is in there, and I'm just holding this upright. And then I'm going to spin and burnish along the edge, and it will set over the stone. You can do this with straight into tubing. You can do it on these posts like I've done, but it's a wonderful way to quick set. And so if you have sapphires or other heat-friendly stones, untreated diamonds, sapphires, not emeralds, but rubies, I think, are supposed to be able to do it. And then, of course, any of the manufactured stones that are for anything that works with metal clay to be cast in, absolutely can be done this way, because you can preset and you can make a whole boatload of tiny little melee set tubes. Just cut them off, make a stack of them, keep them in a box somewhere, and when you want to add a tiny little bit of bling, pull them out, and you've got a preset tube. The critical thing that you should put if you're taking notes is do not quench. It's one of the things that I forget all the time once I've put a stone in, is not to quench the work. But that's all that I'm doing to make these little guys. They look like chandeliers, but you can also get, it's always heavy wall tubing for this exercise, by the way, but you can get up to the size of whatever you can open the jaws to, and you can just put tubing in there. And you can actually also cut. So if you've got your tubing in there, you set a stone, put an inch or so of tubing in there, set a stone, use the saw carefully, and sawing straight down, it's going to help keep it pretty clean on the line, because you're going against the spin. And you cut one off, and then you file it up to clean it up, and then you drill it the next one, boom, 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 set the next stone with the burnisher, cut, set, cut, set, cut, set. It's great. Right? So that's how I went about making these little guys. They will get trimmed off, and then I'll be putting something on the back, because I don't want to hammer rivet against the stone. So I'll put a little disc on the back of each of these once I trim them down. Questions on that crazy little spiel?
What size are we talking here?
Well, these are like 3.5 or 2.5 somewhere. Oops, let me get to this right spot. Right, these are itty bitty.
And can I see
whatever
the
will
back of
fit.
it?
Say again?
Can I see the back of it? Like, is it okay? So it's got a
Back.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, it's so slice of tubing, little bit of sheet below it, and then solder I just put them down. I cleaned them up, put them down on the block, soldered my tube to them in the center. Good to go. But you can also do it straight into tubing, right? I could have done a chunk of tubing without the extra post if I wanted to just like plonk, plonk, plonk and put a bunch down. Like these could have been, in fact, I may have actually done this one that way. Yeah, this one, it looks like it was a tube that I put into my mandrel. I'm put into my flex shaft. Did the same exact drilling, but with the right size burr for it. Oops, I'm out of screen for you guys. This little guy, that's just gold tubing, gold heavy walled tubing, which I get in some of the common sizes, both silver and gold. I just keep stock of the heavy wall. For me, it's usually like 4 and 5 millimeter that I care about. Sometimes I have a 2.5 or a 3, but I don't like teeny tinies. And then I can just make myself a bezel real quick. It's also easier because I can choose which size burr to use, whereas if I'm buying these manufactured, then I'm limited to whatever fits in their size, and I tend to work with stones that aren't terribly well calibrated. So various options that you can do. Any other questions on that methodology?
No.
Buy yourself some cheap CZs, which you can get really well calibrated from Rio, and some tubing that's the appropriate inner diameter to outer diameter wall, thick wall, and practice. You know, cheap to practice. So that's going to be the connectors there, but it's remaining gold on each end. So I have these to connect today if we want to see how that works, assuming my hands are not so dropsy that I can't. And then we've got this modeling that I want to do. So let's get to that. So good concept, but not quite what I'm looking for. So let's see what happens when we design something that is a little bit more pointed at the end, tubular. Did I put down my, oh, right, the one I would usually use has a bit burr in it right now. Do I have another one? That's too thick. Ha. So I find that if you're trying to actively draw on this stuff, it's good to have some cardboard or something behind it so it has something to push back against. But basically, for some kind of conical element, I just have to figure out, I probably should get more precise with my angles, but I'm going to do, again, this material is so cheap. I just want to do some mock-ups to see kind of scale-wise what it looks like. I'm sure there are people who could mathematically do this for me and tell me exactly what angles I need and what my outer rings, upper edge needs to be. But for me, I'm just going to work it up a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm not in screen for you guys again. Let me back out so you can see what I'm actually working on. Feel free to pipe up when I drop out. So some kind of cone, probably trim out that much of it. And then it's just a matter of finding some tools that I can manipulate this stuff with to give myself a sense of what it would look like. I may want to do these in the silver side just so I can get the feel. That to me is certainly longer than I want. Let's see what happens when we trim it down further. I don't hate that. In fact, I kind of like it in the gold now that I'm seeing it in the gold, but I probably need to do another one in the silver to see what it looks like in silver. In fact, I'll make a set of 4 of these so I can flip the silver one back and forth. Oops, that's the wrong one. Just marking them up real quick to get a sense of them. And then what I tend to do is a rough draft version, and then I just like pattern making, if any of you do costume work or make your own clothing or whatever, you can sort of adjust and you can give yourself a little more edge to it so you can play. And the challenging part will be, how are the three going to connect? And I think this cone may solve one of the things I didn't like about my other prototype, which is that it didn't rest very naturally. There are also like websites and so on where you can plug in, I need a conical pattern for, 3 millimeters by 10 millimeters or whatever. And it will do the graphical layout for you. And then you can print it and work from there. They're really wonderful, but for me, they tend to be a bit of a rabbit hole, because then I start thinking about all the shapes that I could play with, and I end up 6 hours later coming out of the fugue of having created all these cool shapes and then don't do anything with it. I do use those kinds of tools for making mokume gane pattern mock-ups and that sort of thing. So
You know,
let's-
Rachel, something occurs to me, just as
Yeah.
always, throwing an idea out. Because
Sure.
you have 3 strands, what
Yep.
if 2 of the cones were the same, but the third one was different, so that it had the way it would occupy the space, and you could compensate as needed by, like, we're not having one less bead or something, you know?
Do you mean in size, or like, because as soon as you said that, I thought, yeah, 1 gold and 2 silvers, or 2 silvers and
No.
1 gold?
I mean,
Or did
literally,
you mean,
2 would be the same, but the third one, and maybe that would be the middle strand, might
Yeah.
be more slender and might be
oh, I got you. The taper would be different or something?
yeah, and it might be slight, because then there would be less bulk as they join together.
Mhm. Yeah,
And
I think that we're going to find that that's the only way to connect all 3 of them. So you can see what I was doing, at least conceptually, in my cutaways here, was I was trying to build them sort of on top of each other and take away the segments that intersected, which is why somebody who has 3D design skills could have like done this for me conceptually and given me the model. But I think what you're headed towards is that some of them will fit inside of each other, and that's what I was sort of trying to do with the prototype. But I think it's going to work better with this idea you guys have given me about the taper, the more conical layers. So let's see. Oh, I should make one more since I've already done so many. 1, 2, 3, 4, no, 2 more. I can do a silver and a gold combo. Too many tools on my bench. I know that that's never a thing, but. So yeah, I think you're right that we're going to see that we need to do slightly different shaping on 1 or more of these by the time we're done.
And maybe
I don't
it
know
would
whether it's going to
also,
be,
I would just say graduated almost, like the one on the outside would be wider and the one on the inside would be thinner.
yeah, I personally have a hard time visualizing that without physical representation, which is why I do this modeling. So we're absolutely going to see and have a chance to try those kinds of variations. And if you were doing lots of these kinds of prototypes, I would say it's worth sort of marking them up, numbering them, and telling, saying this one is my first version and here's what I like about it, and make some notes as you do the version. Don't chop up the ones you've already got. Do it in stages. which is why this is so lovely that you can open it and close it and retwist it and refold it and what have you.
Right. And if I was a mathematically minded person, in my notes, I'd actually say what the measurements of the sheet I got, but that's beyond my function.
Yeah, that's beyond my patience factor. So here's what we get if we just put them all the same. Is that a, let me get you guys closer to that. Wrong way. Oops. Right, so that's the three all just resting now, but this doesn't achieve my desire to have them twisted. It could, but it doesn't sort of naturally flow to that. And this is if they're all just bundled, which becomes, in my mind, a little too bulky. But we could cut them down further. They could be shorter. Could be a sharper taper. There's a lot of options.
Could you
But sort
possibly
of
like put a sheet, like
put a what?
have like another form that's more of a square where they like come together? Yeah, where they meet up all together and then you can, yeah, like, and having a sheet like underneath that, like where it is its own hollow form to like somehow connect
Do you
them?
mean the bottoms?
Yeah.
So I'll absolutely be capping the bottoms, whatever we end up with, because I need something to attach to. I don't know that I would add square into this particular combination because there's nothing square in the design. But I was thinking that that whatever they end up at the bottom, they'll all be flush down. So that it'll be a single bottom amongst them. So I think like if we're looking, if I landed on this, it would be this sort of not quite clovery shape on the bottom, all flush. And then out of that comes a center connector to hold to this. But I think this feels clunky in the large scale. Let me get some tape so that my hands are not so in the way. So as soon as we start just putting the trio together, now just the act of sort of twisting them relative to each other immediately makes it more interesting to me and narrows the profile, right? Which is what I was trying to achieve with my live mock-up.
What you doing, Zach?
Pardon?
Sorry, I'm telling the dog something after
Oh.
my.
So we see, oops, I'm out of screen again. So we see there's a little bit of a torque there, twisted, and that adds a little more interest and sort of fakes the taper in a little bit more, but it still is a pretty overwhelming piece. I do want to see what it looks like with just silver, because I think the silver may overwhelm less. I really like the gold against the stones, though. Now, remember, it won't be shiny silver. If we do silver, it'll be the reticulation silver. But I think still proportionally, it's overall just too big. So let's see what happens when we trim these even shorter.
Can you narrow the base, the bottom of the cone? Can you sharpen
Yeah,
the angle
absolutely.
more?
Oh, do you mean keep the length but narrow it? Narrow it?
Yeah,
Yeah, we
so
can do
that
one like that.
angle of the funnel is the opening at the bottom is much smaller. Depends on what you're trying to do.
Let's try one of them super narrows. Man, I can't even hold on to little pieces of plastic. I mean, of foil today. So the challenge I have is it has to stay wide enough at the top to get the bead. So I think I have an aversion to the super elongated conical because it feels very much like a Native American style connector. And this work is not terribly Native American feel or at all. So I think for me that narrow cone isn't quite what I'm aiming for. Let's see what happens when we do it shorter. We may need shorter and narrower.
Okay, here's a crazy idea.
Yeah.
What if you did something that's more a fold form of one sheet to make 3 receptacles?
I don't know that my fold forming skills are up to that. You mean, are you envisioning something? Here's my drawing board.
Yeah, I mean,
There we go.
if I had it in my hands, I'd probably take a piece of that foil you're using and take like a pencil or a chopstick or something and manipulate so it would be like 3 sections. I don't think it's complicated fold forming, so to speak. But the idea
Like
being,
this?
yeah, something like that, because then you don't have the bulk of 3 pieces.
Let me think about that one, because I would want it to still taper. But the downside of it is that it doesn't hide, it fails to hide the connection, which is the whole point of wanting a tube. So I would have to do that, which isn't terrible. It's sort of like shell-like almost.
Yeah. And I guess the other
Let's-
thing that might be a conflict of that is the whole idea of twisting the strands.
Right, right. Well, so I'm not convinced we can't take what you're describing and make it fit the 3. So that would be this, right? And then 1 bead set, 2 bead sets, 3 bead sets. Let's try modeling that one.
Yeah,
Let's see
something
what we
like
got
that.
out of that.
Just that does away with the 3 separate pieces that each have that dimension, and they bring that into one piece.
Hey, this is why I like prototyping. You can try all the cool ideas. Well, this one certainly makes it more viable for the 3 strands. It doesn't eliminate our bulk, but we may be able to modify it with taper. Let's see what I can do with a taper.
Yeah, what you're doing looks like that would be great, because by cutting it and then, you know, bringing things together, that's kind of part of the mentality of fold forming anyway.
Yeah. Let's see. The center one is the sucky one for taper, because it doesn't want to taper. Metal wants to do what metal wants to do. Okay, this is very awkward looking right now, but it's the right idea. Yeah, I think they still are not going to get narrow enough at the base. It doesn't need to be in that far, maybe. That's getting kind of interesting there.
Did you start with a rectangle or a square?
I started with a rectangle, but then I've now tapered it to a parallelogram. No, not a parallelogram, whatever the one is that is like this.
Yes. And that's where the next step, of course, would be to experiment with the shape, because what if you took a pie shape, which is what a cone normally is made out of, make it big enough that you could manipulate and then cut away what is unnecessary. Just
Right,
another
right,
thought.
yeah. Yeah, and what I'm seeing in, so let me zoom in for you guys so you can actually see this a little bit more. This is heading in the right direction for what I like and what I want, and I like that it's all one unit. Oop, I'm way in my own way, aren't I? So there we go. So that idea of the creating 3 is great, and then trying to taper is a little more challenging on this, because I've only managed to get my taper by crunching, because this stuff is crunchy, and what I really need is to, trim some of it out.
And of course, if you were doing this in reticulation metal, it would be a PIA.
It will be, yep. Yeah, because it's much thicker than what I'm working with.
Right.
But
But-
conceptually, that's getting a lighter feel to connect it. And so let me see if I can crunch this enough to be happy with the point that I'm getting.
And this is kind of experimenting, is what makes making jewelry so much fun, because it's
Yep.
not just the mechanics, but it's being using your brain and opening up and letting things happen. I mean, that's what
Yeah.
what attracts me. It's not, the technical challenges are definitely there, but like,
Right.
what if, I do try this, and then what's the next what if?
So that's part of why I started this particular project, a box of unfinished things, is I want people to really think differently about the work that they're stuck on. And hopefully you guys have gotten some of that. We're almost at 2 years. December will be 2 years. And that you've started looking at some of your own projects a little differently. So this is the right general idea, and I like the idea of the taper. I'm liking this scale. Oops, you guys can't see me waving hands at it. So I'm liking this proportion, like the length of it overall. And I'm liking the idea of it being a unified piece. I'm not enjoying the crunch right now, so I'll have to come up with some variation on it that isn't just because of the metal that I can crunch it down. So modeling this better. I don't want to give up on the individual pieces yet. I want to see what we get with a set of the shorter ones. Oh, this is interesting. I can actually just coil them in on themselves to get myself more taper. So way happier working with foil for my modeling than when I foolishly took a big chunk of my reticulation silver. Thankfully, reticulation silver is one of those ones that you can melt your scraps into a, give yourself another billet and just work your way out. Oops, this one I want to do the other type. Go the other way. The other thing when I'm working on geometrics like this is it always reminds me a little bit of my dad, because he was a mathematician and a computer scientist. And when I was very young, one of his hobbies was building polyhedrals out of paper. And so he would make like 300-sided geometric forms and stuff like that. I was always amazed. Okay, so this is our look when we have the 3 separate pieces. And it really is a lot less interesting than our unit. It doesn't rest as comfortably. It doesn't feel as fluid. I think you're onto something with this. Any other ideas that people want to see modeled? Yes, no?
I kind of
Okay.
like that one.
Pardon?
I like that one.
Yeah, I like this idea. It's going to take, I don't want to waste you guys' time on screen with me cutting and fiddling and futzing because it's going to take a lot of iterations to get whatever it is that I need to cut away to taper. I can show you what I cut away just a minute ago. You can see I'm taking a zig out of the middle, right? And that'll eventually let me do better angles because then I can close up the center point. But even so, when one of the nice things about the foil is that when you unfold, you get information about what you were working on too, right?
Right.
You can still see some of the crease points that were clear points where it wanted to move, and you can see where it tucked and curved. So you can kind of recreate from what you've got. And if you ever need to, you can go in and take something smooth and just sort of erase the wrinkles that you put into it just by scraping it back down. And then you've got your flat model so that once I have it where I want it, I flatten it back out and I can use that to make my actual paper model for each of them because then I can repeat it. So good stuff. All right, I'm going to set the modeling stuff aside and the real stuff aside there. Get all these scraps out of the way. The only downside of these things is if you're doing a lot of it, you might want to do it on a different table than your bench because I invariably get excited that I've found a scrap of gold in my scrap drawer. And it's really not. And it won't do well to your materials if you melt them in anywhere. Get a
Or
few of
you
these
can put a
things
piece
out.
of paper down and work over the piece of paper. And then you just fold the
You
paper.
know, I have tried that and I still get scraps everywhere. Like you can see, they fall into my bench and just all over the place. So if you are neater than I, go for it. But I am constantly trying to figure out, is that real gold? And the other, it doesn't help, it doesn't hurt. I mean, it doesn't help that I also work with bimetal, which has silver and gold. So I usually think it's one of my scraps from my weaving before I get rid of it, which is of about a similar gauge at times to the fake stuff. Where's my cap for this? Leave those over there though, because I think I'm probably going to use that style. Get these extra scraps out of the way. Oops, and I'm not zoomed out for you guys again. All right, so we have two activities that we can do today. And what are we at for time? 5:45. Okay. One is the putting together of the hinges, and the other is that I still need to make myself a gold bezel for this round stone, step bezel. Any preference on the order in which I do that?
Bezel.
If nobody cares, say again?
Bezel.
Bezel, yeah, I think that I probably want to have that done anyhow so that I know I've got them in position before I put my pieces together. So Sunstone, and it is, I think this one's pretty well calibrated. And I'm not actually going to make a 100% gold bezel because on this one, it won't really show. My outer layer will be gold, 6.4. I don't feel like I was calibrated on that. Let's see. Oh, there we go. Because it's going to be down against the reticulation silver and so on, and because it's a pretty rich color unto itself, 6.7. I'm probably going to do silver step, but gold exterior. It saves me money, saves me frustration, saves my customers cost. And I put some aside. There we go. So I usually rough start these on a mandrel. I have like 5 or 6 different round mandrels. of different tapers and different dimensions. But before I actually started, I need to do a little bit of a kickstart to get it curving. And I am using, you guys are going to ask, so let me measure. I am using 24 gauge. Yeah, 24 gauge 18 karat for this exterior. So I'm just going to rough it in with the right side of my half round pliers, hopefully. Making sure I switch directions because I'll get taper otherwise, and I'm not looking for a taper out of this particular bezel. So the first rough in is just with the pliers. That's a pretty impressively close rough in. Huh, okay. Then I'm gonna pop it on the mandrel and straighten it up a little bit because that can get problematic if I don't.
I have never seen a hammer that size.
The mallet,
Is that a mini mallet?
I've had it for years, so much so that I can't tell you what brand it is.
Wow. I've never seen a mini mallet before like that.
Yeah, I used to be diehard about only wanting to use wood mallets, but wood mallets that I really like are hard to come by these days. They're not made very much anymore. There's like two companies that manufacture them, I think. For me, the wood response has the best, like I can tell what the metal is doing. This is the second best, and it's the size that I can bring to shows to resize rings and so on when I need to, or to stretch and reshape rings. Little too big. But yeah, I don't know. A lot of my tools are pretty old. And I often pick things up at antique stores or other jewelers' yard sales or what have you. And while I work with gold, it's certainly not my comfort zone. What I always find interesting is that people who start working in gold first swear that gold is way easy and silver is not. And people who start working in silver first swear the reverse. And I started in silver. Okay, that's pretty close. I'm going to mark it for cutting. When I'm doing this kind of bezel, I tend to undercut, make it too short, and then stretch to get a really snug fit. So what I'm doing is I'm making the outer wall of the bezel. And the other thing about gold is that it takes heat differently than silver. So if you haven't done a lot of work with it, it's worth some practicing. Whereas silver spreads the heat and the whole piece really needs to be kind of brought up to heat at least a little bit. I'm sorry, I'm out of frame for you, aren't I? Gold heats right where you're working. And so if you're heating places that you don't intend to, it can get very melty very fast. It also does better with an oxyacetylene or an oxypropane, an oxy blend. Go in fast and tight, so smaller tips so that the heat stays focused. And I still have just an acetylene set up, so I don't have the ideal for this. I have never gotten around to setting up my Smith Mini. In fact, I may have actually sold my Smith Mini this year because I so haven't used it. I think I sold it to somebody at our guild meetings. But if you have it, it is better for working with gold. Oh, come on. Oh. So what I'm doing is I'm sawing down my seam, keeping the seam snug just to make sure that I have a really, really tight fit, because as critical as it is to have a clean fit for silver, it's kind of easy to fake if you don't have a perfect seam in silver. That is not the case in gold. You need a really close fit. And I have a really close fit except for at the very bottom where I went off track. Let me clean that up a little bit. Do I want to do filing? I think I want to do filing on this one. So tight fit. It also tends to have less flex. It's not as easy to anneal. I need a file. There we go. And there's a whole lot of metalsmiths who actually count on that tight fit. So what they do, instead of putting solder under or above or on top of the seam that you're working, they pinch it between the seam. So you'll see a lot of, especially people that are redoing rings and things like that, you'll see them keep it really highly tensioned and put a piece of solder gripped inside of it. I find that really hard to do with tiny stuff like the thin gauge stuff like this. It's a lot easier when you're doing, say, a ring shank. And I tend to not do, I have a couple pieces that I do in all gold, and I'll do anything custom somebody wants to buy in all gold, but I have too much inventory on hand as it is. I can't afford to keep inventory in gold. So I only have a small collection of rings that I do in all gold. And even in that, I play around with the carats. So I tend to make the band out of 14 karat and the setting out of 18 karat. I'm not a huge fan of the colors of yellow gold, especially below 18 karat, but 14 karat is just a little more durable as a ring band. It's less likely to get dinged up and it's less likely to distort the shape. Come on, nice snug fit. Okay, so let's see how that's looking. Yeah, that's a little bit snug. It may become less snug when it's actually round, but it's pretty darn close for my stone. So I'm going to pop over to the bench and we'll see how steady my hand is today. Are you guys still hearing me? I want to make sure my mic is working all the way over here, which it wasn't the other
It's
day.
working fine.
Beautiful. I don't know, because I can't tell when it's not recording well. So that last recording fritzed out halfway through. Now, the other thing that some people tell me is important is using various sorts of, everybody has their favorite flux. The green glowy flux that a lot of people have, that bright yellow green, is supposed to be very good for gold. I don't think I have any anymore. I think I've managed to either use it up or toss it. But I'm going to do Prips. And I'm going to do a little bit of the paste flux just because it's what I have. The paste flux is not great for this. So this may actually have enough tension that I can do what I want to in terms of gripping it between. Let me try
Rachel, why
that.
are you using both? Like, just when I've done it before, gold bezel, I've just used like one. Well, why are you using Prips and paste flux? Or not,
Because
I'm
the
sorry,
Prips is better for the protection of the gold. That's the only reason. It's not, yeah, you don't have to use both. You could just do the Prips, but I am so accustomed to the sticky factor. Prips doesn't have any glue. It doesn't bring anything attached. But the paste flux helps it stick. So I am so of a child of habit that I use it mostly to get my stuff staying where I want it to be. Oops, did I
like
lose
your
one of those
solder,
legs?
is that what you mean? Like holding the solder?
Yeah, so the paste flux that I've got here acts both as a flux and as a glue. So if I heat and then dip my little bit of solder, it'll stick down where I want it, which is fantastic. I'm gonna try putting should have done this before I put the flux on, but I'm gonna try putting my piece of solder in between, which I just want to open it up enough. I'm just trying to get that cracked apart so that I can shove a piece of solder in between. Come on, little guy. This is where my hands may betray me today because I don't have that grip right now. I need something pulls it apart further. There we go. And of course, I lost my little piece of solder. Here's my backup. So you see, all I'm doing is gripping the bit of solder. I don't know if that's showing up on the screen for you guys, but right up there, it's just held in the material.
And that
in
won't open up when
theory-
it's heated?
So that's what I was just about to say. In theory, gold does less of that open up from the back,
Ah,
that
okay.
because it doesn't spread the heat the way that silver does. I say in theory because it only sometimes behaves that way.
Right.
Other times it gives you grief.
It's
So
only when you say
as
it doesn't
always,
that it
I do
does.
the I'm sorry, say again?
It only doesn't when you say it does.
Right, right. So what I do is I do a little bit of warming up, but not the same level of warming that I would do with silver.
Right.
And again, I'm using a small tip to do this heating. So I'm heating a tiny bit from behind to try and avoid that opening up business before I go in and work the crack itself that I'm trying to solder. And it flowed right off the side instead of down the crevice. So if I can find my other piece of gold, this is why we always have extras set. Nope, I've lost that bit of gold. Gotta cut another piece. So the flow down the cracks doesn't work there. It's my medium or this my hard? It's medium. I want medium. The other thing to know is when you're buying gold and gold solder, buy them from the same company at the same time so that you get the color and carat blend. Gold solder is supposed to flow and remain down at the carat that it is tied to. So you don't want to use 14 karat solder on 18 karat gold if you can help it. You'll see a color differential and it would change your carat value of the piece. But if you are using from that manufacturer, whoever's gold you got, it should be the same color by the time it's done. And it should be just all the stuff that melts out of it leaves it remaining at the 18 karat or whatever you're working on. Okay, so now we're going to try the not stuck in there method and see if I can get it to go a little better. And now that I've said you were going to stick, you got to stick. The bottom stuck. And the top tried to open up. So you'll see that I do a lot more of the flicking across the metal when I'm working with gold. And again, I am not your go-to gal for all things gold. I can't afford to work with it enough to be proficient at it. I can only share with you my experience in dealing with it. But again, if you have an oxyacetylene kit, it'll probably help you out as you work with gold or an oxypropane. Nice thing is, because the gold is of the same carat, when it does finally flow where you're telling it to instead of where it wants to, it fuses at the same time as it flows. Except this one's fusing to the side of where I want it to go. All right, I've now got a half soldered bezel, which is even more frustrating than a not soldered bezel. And I need to go and clean up I need to squish down the seam a little bit more to make sure that it's going to actually connect. And I think I want to pickle this, because I think it's just a little too grubby by now. So just the act of flattening it together gives it a little more tightness. Let me put it in the pickle for a few moments, and we'll talk about the interior line, which I can't actually size until I've got that one back out and rounded and sized. But when you're doing the two-parter, the gold and the silver, instead of just gold to gold, what I find is I'm going to use silver solder on the inside. And I often will make my a piece a little taller than I want, so I have a little leeway to file it down, because I'm going to be soldering from the back. Let me draw this one because my words are failing me on it. Hang on a sec. So as with any step bezel I'm making, I am doing my outer ring of metal, which is our gold in this case, and then my inner ring. Oh, I like this thin marker. I need more thin markers. My inner ring, I'm going to be building like this. Okay, and it's going to be as snug of a fit as I can make. Obviously, this is a cross section of what we're looking at. Except that so top is the stone's going to rest on here, but when I'm soldering it into place, I want my solder to do this, not this, right? That's why I do this little filing down of the edges. So that outer edge of the inner band is going to get filed down, so that when my solder flows, and it will be done from here, when it flows down to here, it just creates the puddle, the flat puddle up top, right? Because it's much harder to seat my stone if it's lobbed out like that. So we're going to, when we're looking at the piece, when we're putting it on the bench to solder it, it's going to be this with this inside, and we're going to be using silver solder, which I'll represent here, and we're going to put it right at the seam between the pieces. So I'm going to be putting lots of little chips. And that's another thing about gold. Don't put big chunks of, like in silver, if you're doing a big bezel or something, you can get away with some fairly good sized chunks of solder plopped around, because it's going to flow. Gold is not going to flow the same way, so lots of small solder bits is healthier than one or two big solder bits like you might do on a silver only bezel. Now we're doing a cross combination of it, so the silver is happy to take the heat, but the gold is still the thing that's the biggest risk that it's going to fight the solder exercise. So hopefully by heating, we're going to heat a lot of the interior silver. We're going to target getting that up to temp. And the good news is gold and silver next to each other in the carats that we'll be using really like talking to each other. They really like getting together. They actually tend, especially if you have a skim coat of fine silver on it, they tend to want to fuse at temperatures that are below what either of them would melt at. Thus, we get kyumbu, where you can do it with a hot plate, right? You're getting to a fusing temp at a much lower temperature than you would a melting or soldering temp. Let's see if that piece is ready.
And are you going to make the step out of sheet?
I'm going to make this step out of I'll probably use fine silver bezel wire, because it's going to be even easier to solder.
So essentially,
but I
sheet,
could do sheet.
not wire. Right. Okay.
Say again.
You said you were going to use oh, sorry. Go ahead. Oh, you said you were going to use you were going to do solder the gold to a silver back piece, and you said you were going to use silver solder, like I'm assuming medium, right?
By the time I get to that, it'll be medium or possibly even easy, because this project, I'll be soldering it down. Oh, no, on this particular one, I'll be soldering it to fine silver. But the one on the reticulation side, medium is the hottest solder you want to use. I mean, the highest level of solder you want to use.
Oh, so you use a lot of
when
easy
you are-
with reticulation and with gold with
Right.
reticulation.
Right. So It's going to be, you want to use as little solder as possible so it doesn't get sloppy. But yeah, that is one case where I might use a medium. I mean, an easy solder. I would not go to extra easy because it's just an abomination. Okay, I'm just confirming whether I've actually got a clean enough line. I think I just need to squish this a little flatter before I go back at it. So I can zoom in so you can see my mistakes up close. Yep, too close. That will focus. So one of my solder blobs, instead of going down the line, this half got soldered well from here down. The blob went off to the side instead of where I wanted it to go. I don't know if you guys can see that little soldery blob there. If I stay out from behind my logo. So we're going to go at it again. I've got a fairly close, that's not a really good fit, is it? Let me see if I can get it any closer. I'm just trying to squeeze together the two pieces that didn't really clean up enough to solder. I'm hoping to not have to cut it completely apart and do it again. Let's go back over to the bench. But I will say this is pretty typical for me when I'm working with gold, especially if I haven't been working with it for a while. I have to come and go and do a couple runs. Oops, I didn't cut more solder, did I? Always cut the solder. That's the thing about working with the gold solder is I'm parceling it out to myself in these like, oh, please, sir, can I have some more? Because it's so bloody expensive that I have to like just trim a few pieces at a time and then pick all the rest up if I don't use them. I know there are people out in the world who get to work with gold nonstop. I'm not sure whether I would actually enjoy being more of a goldsmith than I am. I really like how silver behaves. I love gold as a look, but I like it as an accent material in my own style of work. I find it doesn't have, it has a richness to it, but it doesn't have the textural evolution that I find in silver. And it may just be simply that I haven't worked with it enough. And if I were to have a sugar daddy or a sugar mama to give me the gold that I need, I might be able to learn to work with it in ways that I can do similar effects. Closer. Can you flow all the way, please, instead of just part of the way? One of my biggest problems when I'm making gold bezels, especially the larger bezels that I make for my one heavy gold series, is that I will often melt the far side without realizing it because it does react so differently to the way that heat transfers. So if I'm focusing my heat too much, then I don't get far enough with it. Okay, that makes me reasonably happy. It's going to need some filing cleanup of the mess that I made, but and then again, I'm picking up my spare gold. Say again?
You have to talk to the gold more than you have to talk to the silver.
I don't know that I have the same conversations with the gold that I do with the silver.
Oh,
I know
okay.
that I probably when I am talking to it, I'm probably yelling at it more when really what I'm doing is yelling at myself. Oops, let me zoom back out.
Well, I would hope so, because otherwise you're certifiable.
I think that may be the case either way.
Yeah,
Right, now
join the club.
just gonna straighten this out. And this is another frustration I have with it. It truly does not anneal the same way that silver does. So you have to, it's harder to work. I cannot set gold bezels by hand anymore. I have to use my micromotor. It just takes too much force. Okay, let's hope that this is not now too big. Oh, it is definitely not too big. Does need a little more sizing and shaping though. So while I'm doing this, all I'm doing is working my way down the mandrel, sort of stretch as I go, and then flipping it every once in a while. If it gets stuck, you can tap it off your bench block edge. Oh, so close. Oh, it holds. It's just a little too small still. So I want to stretch this a little bit more, or one of the things I also always do is check that the other end might be a little stretchier than the first end that I checked. Let's see. Not so in this case. This is pretty round. So another way to stretch, and this one you have to just be a little careful and make sure that your bench edge, your block edge isn't too rough, is you can push the piece down against the metal. So I've got it resting, the bezel edge resting on the edge of the mandrel. And then that gives me a little steel forcing the mandrel further down. And I'm doing this fairly gently because it can get too aggressive for it. I'm gonna switch the directionality again. So if I'm looking for just a little bit of a stretch, this will sometimes get just enough. But you got to be careful because it can also chew up your work. Nope, still not quite enough. So other stretch factors, you can still do the good old tried and true plier squeeze method, but it is much harder to squeeze and stretch by hand than silver is. So I'm going to keep doing a little bit of work using the metal to help me push it further. And I want to only do it a smidge at a time because I'm so close that it's really easy to overstretch. And then I have to go through that whole damn soldering exercise again. Super close. Not quite there. Still not quite. As a worst case, you could take a steel hammer and stretch it with that, but you got to be really careful because it'll stretch very fast if you do that. And of course, you have to deal with any marks you've left. So that's why I'm trying to just use the steel on steel without using a steel hammer. Like this is just a little bit of pressure from steel on steel as opposed to actually hitting it. And these steps are true in silver as well. It's just going to go way faster to size in silver than it ever will in the gold. There we go. Perfect. That's what I'm talking about. That was that like, it fit just the way I wanted it. Okay, so now I need to make sure I've cleaned up and filed and sanded and gotten this well sized. So probably don't need to file much on this because this is pretty close to what I need. Let's try a round of sanding. As a reminder, this board is just a really nice edged piece of plexi that I've taped down my set of different sandpapers to. Easy to swap out when one gets worn out because the lower grade grits get worn out a lot faster. One of the things I'll remind you of on sanding is to always sort of change your position back and forth because we all have a tendency to push down more on one direction than the other. And I tend to like, for most of the basic get material out type sanding exercises, I tend to like what I call crazy legs. I want you to be going all over, not just in lines, except for if you're trying to get the teeny tiniest of specific adjustments, then I would go into that careful I'm focusing on what I'm doing. Otherwise, I want to move it around so that I get sort of a balanced bead, balanced file or sand rather. Okay. Looking pretty decent. Make sure that I didn't distort it beyond sizing. Nope, that's looking pretty good. All right, and so I'm going to mark that one of these sides is a little bit wider than the other and is fitting better. So I'm going to just mark my bottom top feature there. So this is my top. And now I'm going to make the silver that goes inside of that. And for this, I'm going to feel like a cakewalk because it's going to be fine silver instead of the pain in the butt that is gold. If I happen to have the perfect height, I will be a happy camper. That's pretty darn good. It's a little too tall. A shorter bezel already. Not sure I do. Oh, wait, maybe I do. Yeah, that's going to be great. Yep, that'll work. Okay, I love it when I already have the materials instead of having to size them. So again, just going to start with my half round just to give myself a rough shape. This is a much smaller interior diameter, so I'm probably going to have to move to a smaller pair or even just my rounds. I just have to be careful. Oh, this one is the interior, so I don't have to be too careful about mucking it up. And in this case, I'm sizing it to the inside of my existing piece, which is a little trickier. But this one, I'm absolutely sizing too small for what I need, because the only way I'm going to get a perfectly snug fit out of it is to stretch it up. So I'm counting on having to stretch it. So I'll cut that shy of what I actually think it will end up. And then truly round it out a little bit, see how we're doing for sizing. Not with those pliers, I'm not, though, those are huge. So once again, I'm going for a nice clean fit, but I'm less stressed about it than I am when I'm on gold. And I happen to have a nice couple of pairs of pliers that are parallel jaw. This is not something I ever expect people to keep in stock, other than a basic parallel jaw pliers, but there's some variations of parallel jaw that are really lovely if you want to spend some bucks, because they ain't cheap, that does the curving for you. It's kind of like having a little, where'd my drop go? There we go. A little handheld version of a ring bender. So I can get closer to my true shape there and check to see whether I'm going to be too big, which I am. Oh, maybe not. So the goal on your interior line is that when you have it fitted, the right side, I have the wrong side. When you have it fitted, you will have to hammer it in to place. I'll have to be doing this, which I may be actually just the right size for that. So I have to solder it together first. So I'm going to now do the soldering of the silver seam. And of course that I can solder in silver. Let's hop back over there. And this is even thicker than I need it to be. Like, you don't need a heavy gauge interior line. You just need about 1 millimeter of material. to hold the stone. Unless you've got a really wonky cut with a super deep belly on it or something. And I'm using hard solder for this because I haven't done any other solders. So much easier to solder silver than gold. You done? Did you do your job? You need a little bit more. There we go. Yeah, like, what was that? 15 minutes of gold going back and forth on the gold and 30 seconds on the silver? Don't tell me gold is easier. Okay, so we're back here. Try that off. And now I've got to really round it. So I'm going to see what I've got to do that. Futz around with various tools that are all the wrong size. Let's see. You help me round? Too small. Let's see, which was our top, which was our bottom. It's the top, so I want it from the bottom side. Well, dang, this might actually work out. I may not have to stretch it further. So what I do want to do is take one edge and with a flat file or a barrette file, I want to take down that upper lip to a bit of an angle. That's that thing that I drew of the inside line.
Can you change the
And what this is doing.
Camera?
Oops, sorry.
That's okay.
Sorry, guys. I'm sitting here working away over at the other bench.
Are you
so
done
what I'm
yet?
doing
No.
is, say again?
No, just kidding. No.
Oh, I didn't even hear. So all I'm doing is taking the top lip down to the angle to give me that little channel that I need when the solder flows up to it so that I don't get all blobby on the inside of the bezel. So one edge is getting tamped down, or not tamped down, but filed down. All the way around. The other thing that this does is create a little path for when you have to hammer it in. And I do mean we have to hammer it in. If it slides in or if it goes in with you just finger pushing it down in, your piece is not tight enough and it will likely open up at its interior seam.
So Rachel, I just want to make sure I know what you had done. You just did like a chamfer on the outside of one of this of the diameter of the
outside top of the edge that I'm shoving into the hole.
Okay.
The outside edge of the interior bezel on the wall that's getting tapped in. I'm basically giving it a guide space.
And you didn't actually solder that closed, or you did?
I did. Yep, I did solder it closed, and then I rounded it. Oh, that's another thing. Don't put your seams right opposite each other. You want, I mean, right on top of each other. You want them opposite each other. Your outside seam and your inside seam.
So you filed a taper on the edge that the stone is going to seat on.
Yes, that the stone will eventually end up seated on. And I've got a little bubble of solder right where I'm trying to hammer it in. I'm going to clear that, and that should be the difference between tapping it in and not. Yeah, let me bring up that drawing again, because this is an important piece for you guys to understand about any step bezel build. And it's a two-parter, the importance of it. So important step one is that this bezel wall, this interior, zoom out a little bit more. So this interior bezel has to be snug, snug, snug. Because if you don't, you're going to have a bezel wall inside, and there's going to be enough air gap that as your solder flows and connects it to the outer wall, it's going to do this, right? It's going to split open. Who's that next to you, Jude? Oh, it's Brian. I didn't see, I only saw half the face. Hey, Brian. So we got our bezel, and you guys have all seen this happen where when you heat, it springs open either while you're soldering something together or not. If there's no room for it to spring open, you will have a good clean fit on that inside line, right? But as soon as you have even the least little air bubble, if we have, keep putting my pens away and I shouldn't, if we're looking at it from the top and we've got this, and our inside one has like that, so that there's this air gap here. As soon as you solder, the solder is going to make it pull right up against the wall, and then our seam will split, right? So that's step one, is it has to be, that's why I'm doing this hammering business. Step two is, because we're making it so snug, it's a pain in the butt to get it in there. So by putting the edge that we're building in to the outside wall. So if I'm looking at just my ring that's going on the inside, right? All I'm doing is taking off this little edge all the way around. So I've got, if I were to do a slice of it, it would go like that, right? All the way around the outside edge. And what that does is it leaves, because it's so snug, it leaves you a little starter point that we're hammering in this way to the bottom, right? So it gives a little gap that starts you down your hammering. And then by the time it gets all the way jammed in, as snugly as we can make it with the hammer, it's left this area where our solder will pool. I'm going to do solder in a different color to help you out, because we're going to be putting our solder here and flowing it until it gets there. If we don't have that little area, even if we successfully shove the metal up in there, what we're going to end up with is we're going to have our inside wall shoved in there. The solder will flow just like it did in the earlier run, but now it's going to pool like this. Right? And that's not going to be healthy. It's going to be much harder to clean up. It's going to be much harder to grind away to get your stone to sit cleanly, because what we really want is our stone to sit like this, right? This is my terrible drawing of a stone right now, but we got to rest it on this. We don't want to rest it on this, because it has to, otherwise has to perfectly fit. Now, you can absolutely go in and drill down with setting burrs if you need to. If you still get blobbing, it's okay to follow up and do the setting burr on top of it, but you may not have as much neatness and cleanness to how it rests if you've done that. This guarantees you a good fit because of the angle that we've built in to create the channel for it. Does that make more sense?
Well, that's the chamfer part, is where the stone sits on top of.
The stone will sit on top of the solder and the chamfer, because it's just that we're making sure that our solder only goes to here instead of going like this.
Okay.
Right? So yes, the chamfer is creating, the tip of the chamfer is where the stone will touch down, in a perfect world, just resting right on there, because then it's got space so that it's not going to chip along the edge of the stone, right? You're not putting, when you're putting pressure down to set, you've got, again, this air gap area here. I should do that in a different color. This air gap from right above. So that's all space.
Thank
That
you.
making sense?
Yep.
And how did you determine the depth or the length of that step?
Of the interior step?
Yep.
The real answer is experience, but the base is, what I'm looking for is, am I going to get past my coulette on the stone?
Right.
Still have room enough to push it over, right? So I know I have enough room overall. Where's my top on this one? There's my top. So I know I have enough room in the stone setting overall, this is going to be, and also, by the way, worst case is if I've made it too tall, then I can only hammer it in part way and solder it and file off the rest. So I'm going to be checking how it seats once we
Right.
get this in
Right.
with the chamfer side down.
Okay, makes sense.
Other questions? Oops, I've still got a blob of solder sitting in the way or something. So this the reason I'm being particular about my sanding and filing on this is this should be so snug that if you have the tiniest little scrap of burring on your material, it can get in the way of a clean fit. So I'm actually making sure that I don't have any chamfer burrs, and that the big thing that was getting in my way was I still had a blob of solder on the outside that was distorting that edge. So now I'm hoping, oops, but I gotta make sure my seams are not opposite or not up to get to each other. What's my opposite seam? There we go. And now, come on. And it is gonna try and tilt and find its way out of the alignment that you want. So you got to play with it and really, and sometimes what I'll do is I'll take, if I'm having a real hard time because it's tiny and doesn't want to behave, I take something wide and flat so that I'm spreading my hammer hit when I get started. That's it. And I can control that tipping that it wants to do right out of the gate. Okay, now I've got it started. And remember, it's okay if the whole roundness of it distorts at this point, so long as we can get a tight fit. And when I say tight fit, I'm going to zoom in on this one because I want you guys to see how crazy tight I'm trying to make this. It should almost feel, there's my mark, too far. Should almost feel like it's been soldered already, right? There's a tiny, tiny smidge of space there, but that's going to fill with solder. But so that's how snug it should be. And then I may have to re-round it, or maybe it will do just fine. And I didn't muck up the other side. Yeah, there we go. So now I can see that I have plenty of room. My coulette is not hanging out of, oops, I'm still too far out of frame. So my stone fits beautifully. My table there's room for me to push down enough material that it'll hold. This is now resting on that, on those points. I'm flush up and my coulette doesn't poke out the back, right? So there's a solid setting. Now I just have to survive soldering the silver to the gold, which before I do that, I'm going to actually pickle this again. Yeah, I'm going to pickle this again because I feel like my gold has been really, I probably have grease on my hands or something. It's been behaving poorly in response to the material. Would it have been better if I had pickled it before I tapped them together? Probably, because I'll get a little bit of pickle stuck between them, which isn't great, but it'll burn off, hopefully. Any questions so far about this?
I just want to make sure that you did the chamfer and then you put it inside and then you hit it flat and then you flipped it over before you put the stone in. So
Yeah, I was tapping it in from the bottom of the piece to like 2/3 of the way down, because then there's the open part that's just the gold above that, right? When I flip it over, I'm not putting the stone on top of what I was hammering. I'm putting it on the side that was chamfered.
Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Right. So I've made a little guy inside of a big guy, but I did it by shoving it up this way, or I was upside down, so I was hammering it down that way. And because it's tight, it doesn't go sliding past where I want it to be. You know, if it finds its way to the other end of your outer bezel, it ain't tight enough and you got to stretch it. And that's going to be that really, this is the part that makes my students go nuts when I'm doing an in-person class. Really, it's going to be like 2 squeezes, 2 squeezes, because you got to do both sides. Otherwise you get a parallelogram. Check it. 2 squeezes, 2 squeezes, check it. Because you could overstretch it in a heartbeat. So you really want just snugging it up and then getting it as tight as you can. I can tell you 100% that it's almost never I get that immediate a snug. I usually would have to spend more minutes on that. I'm not quite sure how and maybe it's making up for the gold pain in the butt. But I don't usually get, boom, we've got them the right size.
But if your
But
stone
again,
is too far
go
up,
ahead.
if your stone is too far up from what you ended up doing, then you just take a setting burr in there. Or just maybe start
You
with the ball burr.
could, but what I would actually encourage is if you catch it before you actually solder, what you do here, let me draw this one too, because this is a good one to visualize. So if I discover at this stage before I have soldered that my step is too high up, so I've got my outer wall and I've shoved my inner wall with its chamfer up in here, and I go to put my stone on, and I'm like, whoop, there's my stone. Oh no, it's hanging out way above, and I can't actually push any of the material over. What I would do is I would take something like the perfectly sized end of my dapping tool that fits right in the middle of it, and I would tap it out so that instead of having it hanging out where I had it, I would have it hanging off the end to the height that I want. Right? And because I'm making it so tight, I cannot reiterate enough. If you haven't made it the right tightness, this won't work. Because as soon as you heat, it's going to go whoop, and try to sink down on you. Right? But if you get stuck, you can do this, and then you're soldering here. Solder's flowing up, filling that up. Soldering here, soldering's flowing up. And then you just cut and file off your bottom. Right? Because our stone will be setting up here. Well, it'll be once we have the solder in place, our stone will be setting where it needs to set up here. So you can take corrective action if you've made it too tall. If you really want to, you could actually chop it off before you shove it in there, just saw it again. But I personally find it's easier to manage it after I've soldered them together to trim it back.
I have one more question, Rachel. I've done that, and then I've also done it where I've used a jump ring. But of course,
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not experienced enough. Of course, I had a teacher like you sitting right beside me the entire time, suggesting what I do. So I don't actually know, like, when would you use one versus the other? Is there any guidelines for that?
None at all, other than stylistically. What do you want it to look like when you look up the bottom? When you look up its skirt, what do you want it to look like, right? Or if you want it really light, right? So a jump ring does essentially what we described, the challenge being that it is harder to get it so tight that it stays in place, right? Because it's more like what's likely to happen if you don't have a jump ring tight is it's likely to do this on you, right? While you're doing that solder in place. But a jump ring is a really cool version of what we're talking about for the chamfer, because it has built-in chamfers. We're putting our solder here and it flows to there. We're putting our solder here and it flows to there. So the curve of the jump ring creates the chamfer on it. So that's absolutely reasonable. I also, one of the things I recommend over a round one is square wire jump rings. So you make a square wire, and then again, you go back and chamfer it if it's a really sharp square, but most square wires that we roll or whatever are going to be a little chamfered themselves. But you would chamfer that top, and it behaves the same way. It's just much harder to position and keep it flush. This one, when we're doing the whole piece, we have a lot more control because we've got this length that's helping it stay in place. So absolutely cool to do the jump ring version.
Thank you for that.
Sure. All right, let me see how we're doing in that pickle, and let's see about soldering this baby. And go over there. Ooh, is that looking as washed out white on screen for you guys as it is on my monitor, or is it just my monitor? Ah,
What do you mean?
no more dropping things. You guys can see pretty well. It's not a big white wash in the middle here.
Well, it's white, but I've been able to see what you were doing.
Okay, good deal. All right, so we now have our bottom end with the silver set inside of the gold really, really snugly. And again, some reminders, our seams are opposite each other so that they don't try to fight and open each other up because silver and gold expand at different rates. So they'll have a battle. I mean, you don't want it, if you're doing gold on gold, you still don't want your seams opposite to be right up against each other. But in particular, when we're working with a mix of metals, and I'm going to put my flux around it. And what I'm looking for here is I'm going to do my medium solder, medium silver solder. And the thing that always sucks for me is invariably I end up melting some around the silver, so I'm going to have to file it away. I'm going to switch back to my regular 1 tip. This is not a case where I want it to be focused heat. I want it to be diffuse. And because I'm working with gold, I'm going to do more of the little pieces rather than big chunks. If I were doing this silver on silver, I would probably put a couple of like 1/4 inch or a little bit less bits of solder around the silver because it was all going to heat the same way. And I want to err on the side of the silver edge. This piece is a little close to the gold edge. And I'm trying to do limited amounts of heat on the gold and focus my heat on the interior, almost. And what I'm looking to do is get my silver to fill the line between them. So I got about 2/3 of this filled. And this one section, which no surprise is the little area that I said there was a slight, tiny, tiny gap, was the last to fill. So the other thing that I'm going to do, oops, and it's opening back up again on that gap. It needs a little more fill. So you'll see I'm using tiny amounts at a time because I don't want to flood this guy, but I do want to get it filling the seams. There we go. And then the other thing I check is to make sure that I've actually brought my solder up towards that chamfer. It doesn't have to fully fill because it's not going to show much, but a good job is when you've got a really clean interior line as well as exterior line. So that's looking pretty good. So I don't know if you're gonna be able to see it on this camera. We may have to wait till it's quenched and over at the other side, and maybe even pickled because it's not going to show with the grub. But we now have a solid line between the two that has flowed up, and you won't be able to see this because it's tiny, tiny. There's solder line running around most of my connection. I got a little bit on that one side that wasn't particularly happy, but it's not going to be functionally problematic. So let me pickle that again so you can see the real clean stuff, and then we're going to clean this bezel up and basically do all the finishing and polishing that we can on it, because after that I'm going to have to solder it down to the piece of work it's going to be attached to, right? And that'll be much harder to get all of the cleanup done around the outside edges. That's it. And that is something that I go over in the metalworks class that I'm teaching. That is what we just did is foundational to all of the techniques that I teach in that trompe-l'oeil. I cannot say that word. I really need to get better at it. That class, you start with those kind of bezels, right? You have to make those bezels and then you modify them. Or you're making half of one of those bezels and you're doing decorative elements on it. So principles of that go into lots of our other construction techniques and go into box lid making and locket making. Like that is learning how to do those snug fits and the nesting thing. And that chamfer effect is really good for anything that you want to nest tightly in. that's a good principle, a good basic skill for you guys to have. Any questions on it while we're waiting for it to clean up? Okay. If you are thinking of doing these kinds of settings and you are trying to play around with different shapes, I encourage you to start with either a round or an oval and get really comfortable with it. A round, I actually usually recommend starting with an oval because it's really easy to see the mistakes in a round. Visually, your eye will be drawn to any mistake in the roundness, whereas in an oval, our eye sort of flows with it. But if you've only got the tools for the round, so you've got round dowels and things like that to shape it on, go for the round. If you're then trying to start some of the other shapes, I would go to a trillion next, which has corners but not sharp corners. And so you can get some of that. You can bend it, but you don't have to do crisp cornering on everything. And then a pear, which is a round and a corner, but the corners on a pear, you actually work past each other. Whereas on a trillion, you're starting in the middle of one of your long lines and working the three sides out of one piece. On a pear, you can do this and create a nice crisp ending to it, right? But they all have different challenges on how you fit that interior line. Fitting the inside of a pear shape is a pain in the butt, right? Because you got to get not only fit your curves snugly, but also make sure that your angle, your point is a tight fit. The biggest problem you get is that there's a gap right at the point between the inside point and the outside point. And so it can leave spacing on it. And then marquee, I would probably do next. Sort of pear and marquee, you could flip flop either way. And then move on to unusual shapes, like we did in, was it last session or the session before we demoed making one for that? And last and very much least, the emerald cut, my nemesis. Any questions?
Yeah.
Okay, let me see if that's clean. Oh, and did I miss some questions from Jackie? Jackie's left, phooey. Jackie was asking some good questions. She said, assume it's not possible to get any beads that are the same material but graduated when we were talking about the tapering. And can you see the shape you started the singular piece out of? I don't remember what that was in reference to, but I can't answer that one. Let's see how we're doing in this pickle. Looking good. All right. There we have a gold bezel with silver interior. Zoom in for you guys. Gold bezel, silver fill. And you know you've done your soldering right if we take our sanding plate and or files, depending on how messy it is, and we file it down on the back end. And sand it down. Almost. Okay, I'm gonna zoom in and see if we can get close enough for you guys to see the little area that was my trouble spot. Come on, focus. Focus. Right there. Nope, too close. There we go.
Oh, there you
You
go.
see this little notch that you're seeing up at the top?
Yeah.
Right? That was my problem spot that I mentioned is a little shy of snug. If I had maybe taken a pair of half round pliers or something and squeezed it a little closer, it might have been tighter to the wall. But it's not actually a problem. It's just the edge of it didn't go all the way. It didn't flow all the way up. It's kept filling below it. So I just have to sand a little further. But what I'm looking for out of my wall by the time I'm done is all the rest of this. You can see it doesn't actually look like there's two pieces of metal other than a tonality difference from the outside and inside. I'm looking for it to be a clean single wall of metal. And that's what you're aiming for with that snug fit. And then when we look in the inside, same thing, there's not gapping, right? Now, if this were all gold, we wouldn't see anything, but as it is, we can see the silver edge all the way through, right? And then we're going to sand and clean this up, and it's ready to use with the stone fitting still, one presumes, because I didn't change its size in between steps. So that'll be quite lovely and sparkly. And I haven't used sunstones a lot lately, and I'm in Oregon, so I should really be using more of them.
I love Sunstone.
Questions? I love sunstone with a good chatoyance or whatever it's called.
Yeah.
I think that is probably enough for one day. But next time we will focus on the connectors for the beads, and I'll probably demo the putting the segments together, those using those little stone setting posts that I did, and I saved one of the how do I solder on the gold bead to the end, which is usually the part at which it breaks.
We
Any
shall
questions
see.
before we go?
No, this is great.
Good, good, good. All right. I will see you. Oh, I will see you on August 20th is our next session. And we
Okay.
will definitely meet then, and we'll go from there.
Thanks, Rachel.
So I'll talk to you all later.
Thanks so
Thank you.
much, Rachel.
Yep.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Fine.
Bye.
Thanks.